what I really know about autism, well, my personal experience is like not having the social skills or um, just having the normal aspects of an average person in the world, and just not acting as normally as most people do. By characteristics than appearance.
So we had been, first time parents already to, our firstborn son, Alex. So I had that to compare to once Max came along. So I did. I started to notice subtle differences early on when Max was an infant. But every pediatrician visit, the doctor would always say, try not to compare, the two children. Let's just understand Max is different than his brother, so he might be progressing differently.
So I think, I first realized that Max was not like his brother. We had that comparison that we could make. And I think when Max was, little, he was different. I could tell he was more introverted and, he wasn't as excited when I would come home from work as his brother was. Um, and so I think we knew that there was something different between the two of them. We didn't know that it was autism. We just knew that there was a difference between the two of them, and we wanted to try and find out why there was a difference, and if there was something we needed to do about it.
But Joe and I got very worried when Max was not talking when he should have had words. So we started to express those concerns to the pediatrician. And I think it was about year and a half, where we decided we were going to get help from a developmental pediatrician. And that's when we got the diagnosis that Max was on the autism spectrum.
Okay, so I remember when Treasure, my best friend, told me that her beautiful son had autism. I didn't know a lot about autism, but when I looked at him, I couldn't understand how they said he had autism because I thought that I would see something different, but I didn't. So to me, Max is Max, who I love and has a kind heart, and I wouldn't change anything about him.
Well, when Max was younger, he did not have many words, so he would have a lot of tantrums and meltdowns early on. And that was pretty challenging for the family because we didn't really know how to meet his needs because he wasn't really able to communicate them to us very well. Um, uh, it was difficult going out in public because sometimes the stimulation of being out amongst people, the noise, the lights in the different stores would trigger a tantrum. And Max would just start screaming and getting very, very upset at the top of his lungs, which would disrupt the whole experience of going out. And it's really just, it was very heart wrenching to not to be able to help your child when you know they wanted something or they needed something, and they didn't know how to communicate that to us.
So, what it was like growing up with my brother Alex is that he was a year older than me, so he always kind of had like superiority over me. Like he would get to do whatever he wanted compared to me, and well, he would usually kind of bother me and tease me when I was younger, but now that he's older, he doesn't really do that anymore.
One thing about Max, about thinking about Max and knowing him young and I think you had that part of the question was about the diagnosis with autism is that I know it's not the same, but we have a son who has who's diagnosed has ADD, and one of the things that people frequently would say, or that they say, is like it's a lack of attention, and so I already knew about the fact that it's not really a lack of attention. It is it is really high levels of attention, but that attention doesn't shift quickly or easily. And in fact, it's almost like, for some people it is lack of attention, but Max, like our son, was, it wasn't that there was no attention, it was always an enormous amount of focus. And we understood this, that the focus didn't shift immediately or without some, it wasn't automatic.
I think that's a really good description of what I remember about Max, was that he was thinking and focusing on things, but maybe less flexible to change and think and focus on other things, like it just, yeah.
What makes me feel different is that I'm always quiet, I'm not really socialized, and I always just do my own thing alone. Like when people try to interact with me, I try to get away from them and not want to talk to them. I would just kind of like get away from it, or like cover my ears so I couldn't hear it.
Well, thanks to all the early intervention help that we had, once we realized what was causing Max to be different than the typical child, then we were able to recruit help from therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists started coming to the house early on to help us. Max started having regular therapies, and then Max even transitioned into the school system very early on. He was only 3 years old.
Well, I don't remember being afraid, but I just didn't interact with anybody that much besides my two teachers. We're at College Heights. This was the first school I went to, and it's also where I first met Miss Browning and Miss Drake, my first two teachers, and I remember just having a lot of fun with them. Also in the playground is mostly where I remember being at, so they really did help me out. Like, I don't think I could have lasted in school without them, in College Heights without them, so I'm very grateful to have them both.
I first met Max, he was in between the age of 4 and 5, because I was teaching him in pre-K at College Heights, College Heights, ECLC. And the very first day he came in with his parents, we were doing a meet and greet before school started. And I immediately thought, oh my God, this kid is so cute. And I just wanted to squeeze his cheeks, and he just was so adorable. And and I was thinking to myself, his parents are really cool and funky, and I like their vibe and their energy. So I just really was attracted to the family as a whole immediately. But I could tell that there was some kind of difference, something that even though he was answering my questions, there was, somewhat a little bit of a delay or some kind of blockage, that he wasn't like he wasn't engaging with me like full on, like most of the kids did. So I did notice that there was a difference. Well, our class was an inclusion class, so we had quote unquote average children as well as some of the special needs students. So one part of our day, Max would get pulled to a separate class, but most of the day he was in the class with us, and we did have a special needs teacher that was in there with us as well. I never really felt like Max needed that much extra help because he clearly was extremely intelligent. It's just that he expressed himself in different ways. But I never felt that there was anything that he was not absorbing. I knew that he was absorbing everything around him.
Oh gosh, there's many moments that I've been most proud of Max. All along this journey we've taken together so far. Um, I want to say, I guess I'll tell you a story about when Max was very, very young and didn't have words yet. We took a family vacation to Long Beach Island in New Jersey on the beach. Joe and I, we wanted to have the boys, they were very young then, experience the world of a beach community and experience seeing the ocean. Max was not talking at that point. However, we were reading every day multiple books, and one of his favorite books was a book by Eric Carle called The Very Quiet Cricket. But the book made noise like a cricket at the very end. And it was a very repetitive story, and so the words, we read it so often that trip, Max was actually able to say his first few words from that story that Joe and I would read him. And it was a very pivotal moment for us because we realized that all the therapies and things we were doing to help him were actually making a difference. And I was very proud.
So this is Claremont Elementary. This is the second school I went to, and it's my favorite, mostly because I can walk easily to there because it's so close to my house. My parents would always walk me up to here, walk me and my brother up here, and there would always be a morning assembly, like we would meet in the auditorium, and they would just be playing music and singing songs and stuff like that. We don't really have that anymore in high school. We mostly just stand for the pledge there now. We don't even say it in Spanish either. And afterwards, we would just go to school and go to our classrooms, and I just felt like it was all like basic learning, like learning the alphabet, numbers, simple math, simple history, stuff like that. We would always have like computer games we could play. Like there was this thing called Imagination Station, which I really liked a lot, playing that all the time. And we would always have recess, and I always enjoyed being on the swings, mostly, and just running around out in the field.
Well, Max was just about the cutest kindergartner you've ever seen. He had this great bushy brown hair, and he wore Spider-Man everything. He loved Spider-Man, so he always had something blue and red on. And when I first met Max, he was a little reticent, a little shy. He did not warm up immediately, but he was ready to come to kindergarten. He didn't cry, which a lot of kids do when they first come to school. Max was ready to go to school, and he was ready to be a big boy. Sure, I remember a lot of that year of working with Max. It was, I guess it was 13 years ago, since Max is a senior now, and he would do anything that I asked him to do as long as we had a little bit of Spider-Man to go along with it.
Well, I was really into Spider-Man back then, and ever since I got older, I kind of just was finding other things that I liked to do.
So Max sat at the end of a table. He sat like at the very end of a table, and there were other kids around the table. So it was easy to just pull up my chair and sit right down next to Max. And sometimes Max needed encouragement. His confidence was, sometimes he felt like it might be too hard, and if it was too hard, he didn't want to try if he knew he couldn't be successful. But I found that when I was close to Max and I could, encourage him and give him some encouraging words, and again use that Spider-Man tactic, he definitely would rise to the occasion and get his work done.
It was a school project Max was working on, and it was the American folk heroes. And I loved American folk heroes, and you really knew about. I mean, Max knew about Paul Bunyan and the steel driving man, and John Henry was the steel driving man. Yeah, and you kid really is learning, he's absorbing, and I was proud of Max at that point.
So working with Max gave our classroom some really exciting things. One is that it added some diversity and some inclusion that the students were so kind with Max, and Max loved working with the kindergarten students. He was a good friend. He brought so much to the classroom, and he was super artistic. He loved to draw, and it just opened everybody's heart and mind to being really inclusive. He was the kind of kid that even 13 years later, you remember him. He was so special that you just never forget who Max Dreher was. He was that kind of student. And I've been teaching for 25 years now. And I've had a lot of students, and I've taught a lot of students. And Max is just one of those kids who will always have a special place in my heart. He was just about the most adorable 6-year-old you'll ever meet. And I think he can just offer so much to this world with his creativity and his just positive outlook. I'm so lucky to have known Max. How special it was to have someone with autism in a classroom to open the hearts and minds of students and teachers. He had this smile that just lit up the room, and students and teachers, everybody just loved Max. And if he just could share that, his personality with whoever he comes in contact with, he would just make their lives so much better just by being him.
So my favorite activity to do in the playground at recess has always been on the swings. Like, I always enjoyed being on the swings because it just felt like the closest thing to actually flying in the sky. Like, you just go up and then just come back down. So we're at Carl G. Renfro Middle School now. This is where I first went to middle school, and it's pretty much when everything in school started to get complicated. Like, it was a step up from like the 5th grade to now. My non-socializing just kept happening more and more. Like, and teachers were not, like, schoolwork was getting harder, and teachers weren't really treating you as a kid anymore. I feel feel like when I first got to middle school, I started to become more mature.
I remember one time he was in middle school and I was substituting over there one day and I got to go have lunch with Max and I hadn't seen him in a little while. And it just melted my heart just watching him, not being a 5-year-old anymore and, growing into this man. But I could tell that he was really excited that I was there and that we got to spend that time together. So it's just been really a joy to watch him grow into the man he's becoming.
When I moved here to high school, I was honestly I was really nervous because I know this was going to be the most challenging years of them all, and that I was going to have to work extremely harder than I normally do.
As a mother, I think I'm always going to worry about my children, Max and Alex. I used to worry, I think, a lot more when Max was not able to talk and had a lot more autistic behaviors. He has, developed into a young man that compensates really well. He still has some idiosyncrasies, but he doesn't worry me as much because he always exceeds my expectations. And he's growing up to be a fine young man. I do worry today. I want him to be a productive adult in society, and I think he has a lot to contribute as a person on the autism spectrum. Just because autistic individuals are different doesn't mean to me that it's always a disability. I think that Max can bring such amazing things to this world and the community around him. If people would just take a moment to open up their hearts and their minds and realize just because somebody's different doesn't mean they're unusual or disabled.
A way I sometimes think about the autism is it's a hyper rationality. It's a way of seeing the world that's very straightforward, and really I worry less about Max because he sees things. He isn't thrown off course very often. He really has a pretty clear idea about what he thinks and what he does, and it's not clouded as much by a lot of confusing ranges of uncertainty or emotions that are like not quite right or whatever. It's a very rational approach. I remember saying once to Max when we were out at lunch, and we always talk very openly, and because Max has always been just very, it's like a rational matter of fact approach, and we said, Max, really, we worry sometimes about how we must be hard to deal with because you're so rational, because you see the world so clearly, and we sort of are always off on some random other course. So I don't. You always worry about when you're a parent and when you've watched kids grow up. They're always on your mind, and you always think about them and worry about them. But I don't worry about Max. Worry about him. I think he's doing great.
I don't worry about Max now and didn't then because maybe some of the same things Cindy is saying, but I recognize that you had a certain strength and certainly an amazing heart, and those things are very important in developing, and I knew you had them, and I knew your parents were on the right track with taking care of training and schooling and things, so I didn't worry and don't know about Max.
Well, I think the one person who motivated me the most was a teacher named Miss Goodwin. She was my math teacher in 6th grade, and she just encouraged me to do my best and go on and just keep going until I graduate. But I felt I was honestly doing so well thanks to encouragement and hard work I was doing that I felt like I was gonna carry that on to high school and just do good there. And that's what honestly kept me from breaking down and feeling stressed. When I first came to high school, I was very nervous that it wasn't gonna go as well for me as it did back then. But I feel like, since it was the beginning of the year, they were gonna start off pretty easy. Like, freshman was my easiest year in high school, and it was also the time that I was actually working with people more on like projects and stuff.
So I met Max, I think he was a freshman at the high school, and I didn't get the chance to teach Max, but I think he had study skills, and all the teachers in the special ed department kind of knew the kids even if they weren't in their classes. And I remember thinking, that looks like a really nice kid. Maybe I'll get the chance to teach him. And sure enough, then I did get to teach Max his sophomore year in geometry. And my original hope that I got to teach him came true, and he's just the most personable student and just the kind of kid that you love being a teacher for. So Max, he's personable, he takes initiative, he asks questions, he has a really good work ethic. And so sometimes because he's doing so many things well, I could at times make the wrong assumption that he understood what he was doing. So because Max was so polite and so personable, I had to be intentional from my point of view as a teacher to make sure really Max was doing all of his work correctly. Because sometimes when students struggle, you can really tell because their demeanor will change, or they'll get frustrated with the teacher, but Max didn't exhibit those kind of frustrations I was used to just because he's such a positive person. So I had to be a lot more in tune to the work that Max was doing.
So I think when I first met Max, I was surprised that he was getting speech therapy. Obviously I was assigned as his speech therapist. I was his case manager for speech. So I knew that he was eligible for speech therapy services. And I knew that his eligibility category in special education was for autism. So I think I had a picture in my mind of what he might be like. But then when I met him, I remember being surprised because he didn't to me stand out as someone who really needed a lot of services. He was very affable and very social. He seemed like a good conversationalist, and he seemed very socially oriented. And he carried the conversation well. He answered all of my questions well. He seemed to be, pretty aware of how he was perceived, and seemed to be doing really well in his the classes that he was in. I think I thought at first I noticed that his voice, he was a little slow sometimes to respond to certain things, but I also knew that he was Southern, and so sometimes people with a Southern drawl speak a little slower. So nothing really stood out in terms of him being different. I mean, I think if anything, I noticed that he seemed more polite and more socially aware than many students I've worked with his age. So that surprised me.
I love when I see Max in the hallways. Even though I don't teach him anymore, I love getting to see him because Max is one of the rare teenagers that takes a moment to genuinely pause and ask someone else, including myself, how we're doing, that it's good to see us, and I love that he's very intentional about making that personal connection and caring genuinely for others. So I'd say I'm proud of Max every single day because he really takes time to see how others are doing.
I feel like we had more conversations as I got to know him a little bit better about kind of problem solving the future, problem solving, um, encouraging and talking through kind of his future. But I knew that other people were having those conversations with him as well. It wasn't just me. So I think if anything, I was really just trying to help him think about the future, about what he wanted for his future, in terms of whether it be higher education or employment after school, and what kinds of, social interactions that he would be potentially having as part of that. So, I would like to think that I was helpful in some of that, but I also think that Max was sort of so far along in his journey that I don't think I really contributed much. I maybe just kind of nudged him in a direction.
Some challenges I had in high school was just sometimes I had to work in a group I always couldn't work on stuff on my own. Like I had to work with others to get schoolwork done. I feel like high school has really encouraged me more to just work with others and just collaborate with them. And we get the project done a lot faster with working together.
At that time, I felt very proud of you and your advancement because you were fitting in with kids your own age and having fun with them, and they were having fun with you. Max has become much more aware of the world around him and begun interacting with others besides myself. And I feel like he has more or less caught up with children who do not have this problem.
Because I just had time just figuring out some problems on my own.
You could see the way his brain was working and developing, and so something came up about, I think maybe Raymond's father had died a few months ago or something like that, and he said you could see Max's brain. You could just see, it was beautiful because you could just see that he stopped a minute and he thought about that situation, and you could see the steps, which that's the learning process when those are pieces that just don't automatically fall into place, and he stopped, and his face sort of changed, and he said, Raymond, are you doing okay, or is everything all right, or something? But it was just this real
I think
lovely,
I remember that.
yeah.
I do remember that, yeah.
And you just go, wow,
Yeah.
that's not anyone saying. No one said a word like, Max, why don't you try it this way, or Max, you should, look at my face, or whatever. It was, I guess, internalizing. It was becoming part of Max.
Yeah.
Just another problem that I was having was my lack of self-confidence. Like I didn't feel I was doing well, and I always needed help from my teachers if I didn't understand something. Well, I think what I remember is that how the teachers commented to me that I was doing so well compared to most students in high school, and just the fact that I felt like I was doing so poorly on a project, and then I feel that when the final result comes in, it turns out I did great.
And I think that what happens once you move on past high school is that you're in a world where it's suddenly the pieces sort of get to be more different, and you're not under the same pressures, and you are allowed to be more who you choose to be. And that won't be a problem. Max will be great. I do hope, I suppose, as you do for all people, and I count myself as one of these people who are not like fully normal, that you do hope to find people who aren't necessarily like you, but who are that you can be the same and different around, all all at the same time. I think that's the thing, and that's what you always hope for, for people moving from high school and 18 into the bigger world. And I think probably it will get easier. Yeah. And I hope so. I mean, I hope that for every 18-year-old. So that's what I would say.
I think I would just encourage him to keep doing what he's doing in terms of his, he's a really socially oriented kid, and I feel like if he keeps that up, he'll do well. I would encourage him to just be aware of his strengths and his weaknesses. I think, again, for his age, I think I've been struck by his overall just orientation towards people, and his he's very respectful to his teachers, and I think he has the potential to do very well in higher education or in employment, and I think just being true to himself, being aware of where he may need help, in terms of if it's assignments, remembering to get assignments done, or remembering to be to work on time, things like that. I think the only thing I noticed last year was sometimes I would go to get him and he would be late. He would not be in class yet because he was running late for the day. So I think being aware that that's something that is an issue for him, maybe being on time. I think when you're in the workforce, there's a lot less leeway with that. You can't be late to work too many times before you're getting called into the manager's office. But I think in terms of who he is as a person, I think he's a great person, and he's got a good heart, and I think he's going to do very well. So I guess just my takeaway would be just to keep being who he is, and know where his strengths are, know where his passions are, and follow those, and know where there are areas that might be more of a challenge, and try and figure out some ways to mitigate those. So if it's setting 3 alarms in the morning to make sure you get up and get out of the door on the time, then doing that. Those would be my words of advice.
Oh, hopes and advice for Max when he becomes an adult. So I hope that Max continues to be a gift to each of the people that he interacts with in his life. His family, his friends, his neighbors, anything. And every person in his community, it's really going to be a gift when they interact with Max. Just from friendship and care. So that's my hope, is he continues to emanate the joy and positive attitude and care for others as he grows into being an adult.
But the early intervention, I believe, is what has helped him to be the successful young man that he is today. He is transitioned into a regular classroom with typical peers, and he has, obviously gained his words and is able to communicate and articulate what he needs, and has questions about the world, and is a very bright, intelligent young man.
So, Max has always been a sweet, loving kid. He's always shown that he loves me. We love each other. We've been in each other's lives for 18 years now, and I just see him as a kind, loving young man now.
Were you?
No, I knew he was in good hands with his great parents, and I saw his kind heart, and I knew that he was going to do well no matter what he wanted to do. I love the fact that he can focus and know what kind of goals he wanted to have in life, and watching him grow up has been just such a joy.
In my future, I either hope to pursue my dream by becoming a film director, going to film school, or just living a casual lifestyle like most people do, just having a job and home with bills to pay.
Max and his family, I've been really blessed to have them in my life. Like they are people that they probably don't even realize how much of an impact that they have had on me personally. And Max, just watching him grow and become a young man, for me is really just humbling and endearing.
Oh gosh, I want Max to be very happy and settled in his life. I want him to believe he can be and do anything that he wishes, no matter what type of label or diagnosis he might have. And I want him to stay healthy and just be a part of my life until I'm leaving this earth.
So is that it?
That's it.
Alright.
I don't know. Is that it? You tell me. Cut.
So the process of making this movie, it kind of felt like it was a reminder, like I was kind of reminding myself of who I was back then and who I am today. And my interviewees do a perfect job kind of explaining what they think about me and what they like or dislike or have opinions about me, and just saying how they can somewhat relate to me. I kind of reflect on the person from back then to who I am today, and I also learned how to the process of making an actual movie, and just that it's basically not just creating it but also telling a story. Like, I'm basically telling my story, and people who watch this can somehow relate to me and know my differences, but know that I'm really just a typical person like everyone else.